You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Struggling to secure on-prem apps with modern identity? Don't worry, you're not alone. Join industry leaders from Fortune 500 organizations to secure your apps on any cloud with any IDP, regardless of your environment's complexity. Meet Strata's identity orchestration platform, Mavericks. Say goodbye to the headaches of app refactoring and legacy tech debt. With identity orchestration, you can modernize legacy apps to use MFA or passwordless authentication in a few weeks, migrate from one IDP to another, and so much more without changing the app. No matter your IAM use case, Strata extends the value of your current identity investments. And the best part? You can try it for free today. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. Siyu Mo is Assistant National Cyber Director at the Office of the National Cyber Director at the White House. Our own N2K President Simone Petrella recently caught up with Siyu Mo. Here's their conversation.
All right. Well, I am so thrilled to have Siyu Mo from the White House here today. And for context for everyone listening, in July of 2023, so just about last year this time, ONCD, the Office of the National Cyber Director, put out the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy. So, Siyu, to kick things off, we're about a year in. How are we doing on progress on the strategy?
Well, good to see you, Simone. Really admire your work. I've been following your work for quite some time now, so I really appreciate the
I'll take the compliment every time.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk about what we're trying to do here at the White House on cyber workforce and education. And you were right. Time flies. I mean, the strategy has been out for almost a year, not quite. And we are really excited to kind of give like a progress report about what we're doing, how we're doing. But I can't stress enough that I say this all the time. It's bear repeating again, is that the White House Office of National Cyber Director, ONCD, is not the first office that is trying to solve the cyber workforce and education issue. A lot of people have been doing a lot of good work throughout the years. So, I just want to stress that, we're not the only ones and we're not doing this alone. It's just always good to start off by acknowledging all the good that's been done and then talk about how we can collectively move everything forward together.
So I think one of the things that I'd love to sort of kick off on is that there is a progress report that you are all looking to release here in the coming days. Can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect to see as that report becomes public?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. The report essentially reaffirms that the foundation of solving the national cyber workforce and education issue is sort of like ticks all of us. We are talking about what we are doing as part of the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy, which I will call, it's a mouthful, which I will call the strategy from now on. So what the strategy is prescribing is that, there are three broad issues in what we're facing today, right? Not enough Americans are considering a career in cyber or cybersecurity. They either don't see someone like them in the field or they don't know anyone who are in the field, or they always assume that it's a narrow and technical role, like, the old cliche of like the guy in a hoodie, hacking and defending in the dark room kind of thing, right? So that's one issue. And the second issue is training and education opportunities have not been able to keep up with the demand, right? So that's the second issue. And the third issue is the the idea that we don't have enough locally driven collaboration to connect people to jobs, connect people to training, or provide wraparound services so that workers can get the support that they need to actually pursue a cyber career. So what you will see in this report is sort of like a narrative on some of the progress that we have made on all of these three areas, right? I can go into more detail later on, but just to sort of like frame the conversation here, is that, from the federal government standpoint, ONCD is coordinating with 34 other federal agencies so that we are all doing this collectively. And then we are also working with non-federal government organizations, right? Like private sector employers, academia, state, local, and territorial governments to actually, move the ball forward together. And we have commitments from over 100 organizations. So, I can go into a little bit more detail, but what folks should like to see is some progress on those three broad areas, and then a narrative on what are some of the priorities that we have in the future in regarding to those three areas.
One of the things, and see, this is very near and dear to my heart, but from the spring, there's been a lot of releases coming out of the White House and then subsequent reporting on the emphasis on a skills-based approach for employers, but also the federal government. And I was hoping, you could sort of provide a bit of explanation and clarification on what does it mean to do a skills-based approach in cyber? And what does that mean from an ONCD perspective?
Sure. I think many of us always relate skill-based approach to only skills-based hiring, right? I think I want to kind of put a stop to this and say, hey, it's actually more than hiring, but oftentimes the work starts at hiring, right? Because when we think about skill-based approaches, we have to think about the skills that are necessary to do a particular job, which lends itself to changes and updates in a job description, for example. It lends itself to changes in qualifications, right? And all these different things. So, but what I want to kind of take a step back is to sort of ask the question, okay, why are we doing skills-based, right? The reality is a lot of Americans have certain skills and they have acquired either from a job or from a training, but they might not have an official certifications or degree, right? So when you focus on skills, what we're doing is that we are making sure that we are removing and lowering the barriers without lowering the standards, right?
Yeah.
So that allows us to actually build the best team possible to achieve the mission that we want. Okay?
Yeah, and
so
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because, if you don't have that understanding of your requirements to begin with, how do you actually start the process, continue the process? Like, you can't implement it for anyone without doing that sort of foundational workload.
That's right. So when we think about skills-based approach, it has to start from the very top, right? From a strategic level about what are the skills that we need to accomplish the mission, and let's figure out who, what level of employees and, that should like what kind of role should have what skills, right? So that, we believe, gives you a more flexible way of thinking about talent and the pipeline, right? So now, we're not going to get there right away, right? And I think, and I totally understand that as you're trying to promote skill-based approaches all across the country, we realize that the federal government has to lead by example. And as you know, Simone, like making changes in federal government is difficult, but there are areas when we kind of get a lot of people together, and that's why we, worked with Office of Personnel Management, OPM, and Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and our 34 other federal agencies to sort of like, hey, but if there's a way for us to sort of get going, right? Get as much of the processes converted to skill-based approach, let's do it. And that's what we announced in April of this year at the White House convening for good paying, meaningful jobs in cyber is let's take one occupation series in the federal government. So this is like the broad categories of jobs that affects a lot of cyber workers. And we found that about 60%, or a little bit more than 60% of cyber workers in the federal government is covered under the 2210 Information technology management series. So what we have decided collectively is the administration will modernize, right, the 2210 occupation series into skill-based approaches, right? So that means, we're going to try to go as far as we can, right? Starting from minimum qualifications, right? Looking at roles and all these different things, right? Now, I don't want to sort of prejudge the potential outcome, but to know that, it's more than just hiring, it's the whole approach itself, right? So and the staffers are currently like working really hard because we have a deadline. I'm sure they're getting this done by the summer of 2025, right? But I hope, also see a lot of the, we're trying to adopt a lot of best practices. OPM is talking to the interagency. We are talking to the interagency as to try to set this up.
Given the deadline that's coming up for summer of 2025, just to maybe dispel any concerns that anyone listening would have, that obviously sounds like a big deadline, but what's the volume of job descriptions that we're talking about here? Just because I want to kind of be able to make clear to an audience that, it might not necessarily take you a year, even though the federal government for, 100,000 occupation series positions.
Well, what I would point out is, a lot of all this work are ongoing, right? And this is just sort of like the culmination of it. And it's what I would say about, about that. And then like for those who are listening, when you're making policy changes like that, we have to remember this is, people's livelihood, right? And then like, we want to do it right. We don't want to rush. We don't want to rush it. And we want to make sure that we follow the processes that we have in place. And then also, we're talking a lot about, like the 2210s exist in a lot of different departments and agencies.
Yeah.
So, we want to make sure that everyone's equity is represented here. But I think the signal that we're sending, right? Like the takeaway here is if an organization as large as the federal government is willing to do this, right? I think like all of us, right? Organizations big or small, all across the country, not just in Washington, D.C. or the tech capitals around the country. My hope is everyone kind of comes together to really look at how they can take advantage of the benefits of skill-based approaches can provide, right? Think about the business objectives that you have, the mission that your organization is trying to deliver. Think about the skills that you need as you come up with a workforce strategy, like a talent plan that you have. And then so think about how you can kind of create a pipeline, set up so like the workforce mixture that you need, right? Like not everyone has, not everyone has to have, not everyone has to be the most senior and technical person. There might be like, a combination of like some senior and, entry level, right? So I feel like when you start thinking about skills that in that sense, that opens up how you think about your workforce. And then in turn, change how you'll go about recruiting and retention, reskilling and upskilling, right? So that's sort of like the key thing here that we're trying to push for is, yes, it's more than just about removing a degree requirement, right? I happen to believe that degrees are extremely helpful. And, I have a degree myself. This is more about how can we take a more agile approach in thinking about skills and talent and workforce. And the benefit is it opens up pathways for more folks who might not have the right technical degree, like Simone, you and I, we've seen some of these famous or popular cyber people. They're like philosophy majors or like musicians. Yeah. So, if you think about like, hey, we need, CS degree only, then you kind of miss out on all this other talent, right? That's what we're pushing for.
I mean, I just want to emphasize what you said right at the beginning. I think the takeaway is if the federal government can embark and sort of lead truly by example as the largest employer in the United States, then, we should be able to do it in our own organizations too, and take that step and invest in it.
Yeah. And then if you look at the way the federal government is investing, so here's the second takeaway for everybody, right? As the federal government and the Biden-Harris administration is making tons of investments across the country, right? across, CHIPS and Science Bill, Inflation Reduction Act, right? And the bipartisan infrastructure law, right? Just to know that, we also have complementary efforts to make sure that the American workers, right, the workforce, are equipped to actually, deliver on those investments, right? And as part of that mixture, what we have done, in the implementation of the strategy is to align cyber workforce and education needs with all these investments, right? When you think about it, right, as the world's getting more digitized, if we're making an investment into like clean energy, right, battery manufacturing, we're going to need cyber folks to help protect those manufacturing plants. We're going to need, we're thinking about charging stations. We're going to need cyber security in charging stations, right? Same thing with chips and science. Same thing with, building a new wing in an airport. It will be cyber consideration, right? So as part of that, ONCD is working in integrating and aligning this workforce strategy with all these other workforce efforts that we see from the federal government. And a couple of things that would point out, like, just sort of like to build on the skill-based approaches that we talk about is, the Biden-Harris administration has invested about $440 million in registered apprenticeships. Now, not all $440 million is for cybersecurity. It's also for all these other high demand and in-demand industries. But cybersecurity is one of the categories that we are pushing for, right? And that type of on-the-job learning, right, on the job training, in which workers can earn and learn at the same time. And that's just like a variation of how we can provide quality pathways, but also another way to think about skills. Because when you think about skills, then you realize, wait a minute, there are some skills that I really need when somebody starts working, and then there's some skills that I can help develop once they join the organization.
We'll be right back. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, saving you time and money. With Vanta, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber for $1,000 off Vanta. The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.
One of the disconnects and challenges that, I see and we see in some of our work, and I think the apprenticeships were like a great example of it, is we've started to make real progress on the entry-level side, and we had some recent data that was released out of CyberSeek that shows that we've actually, for the first time, started to see a surplus in entry-level candidates. But, is that because we've actually created more entry-level candidates, or are we actually not providing them enough opportunity to get into those jobs? And so
we ought to ask that questions, right? Because that's the missing middle. We call it the missing middle issue here in the White House. So I just want to kind of point out, right? I want to thank Lightcast for releasing that report, because and you will see in our initial implementation report that is coming out, is that Lycas made a commitment to the White House that they would be creating this skills report as part of their support of the strategy, right? So that just, I just want to kind of make sure they get the call out because that's just one example of, the government cannot do it alone. It takes all of us. And in this case, we made a very deliberate approach when we released the strategy to know like, hey, we do need more metrics. We do need to know more why there are folks who have certifications and yet they haven't been able to get connected to a good pathway into a job yet. So, kudos to Lycas for like delivering on the talent report for all of us, right, for the benefit of the whole ecosystem. So appreciate that. Now, back to the original sort of like what you were saying, like, hey, we have to ask the question, are we creating so much more candidates for entry level now? Or are we artificially changing the work roles to sort of say, hey, we actually need, instead of one person with, I don't know, 2 to 5 to 8 years of experience with these skills, and then everyone is going for that small pool of candidates. And this is what I tell companies all the time, or I know that all the employers, right, private and public, is that the entry-level employee today is the senior technical employees of the future. If we do not continue to grow and develop our entry-level employees, then the missing middle problem that we have, right, it will continue to grow. So you kind of have to think about, you have to kind of balance like what you need today and also what you need 2 to 5 years from now, because you can already see what the trend line is, where the thing's going to go. So what we want to push with skill-based hiring and approaches is like, hey, you consider changing maybe your entry level roles, right? Should you kind of move your roles, be more flexible in how you think about your roles so that there's a way for you to get more of these entry level folks, there's a pathway for them to get new skills, then they become the next level senior talent that you need. And then also perhaps you need to kind of reassess your current senior talent role, right? Are they doing too much? Are they, is it reasonable, right? Are you looking for the unicorn, right? Which, based on data so far, seems like by and large, companies are looking for that unicorn. Because we see this as like, because, the fact that people are getting paid a lot of compensation to move from like one sector to another, that's a proof point right there that like after someone hits that 2 to 5 year experience mark, they get recruited to everywhere else. That's a sign for companies to be like, okay, we need to rethink this, and we think skill-based approach is the way to do it. Coupled with things like registered apprenticeships, cyber clinics, right? All these other stuff that we're doing to get more hands-on learning. But there's also a limitation on those programs, right? In terms of like those hands-on approaches we can do to get folks to the level that you need.
On that skills-based approach, I wanted to also emphasize something you just said, because Rick Howard and I have this theory about how cybersecurity is actually, we're at the beginning parts of the analogy to Moneyball, when the Oakland A's baseball team had to field a team with a budget that was significantly less than the best teams in the league, like the Yankees. And so you can't buy your unicorns at that point. In fact, they lost all their unicorns, their A players. Yeah. And, in cybersecurity, I think that the kind of the challenge that companies often struggle with are, they're not all fielding the same amount of players. And so the positions are all slightly differently defined if you break down the skills. But we sometimes forget that has to then get tied to their business objectives. And that's an opportunity that we have, because then you can say, what are the skills I need for my business objectives? How many people am I actually kind of creating to actually build out this capability? Now let me think about how I can actually fill those with talent that either is in the pipeline, is existent in my workforce that I have to upskill, whatever else it may be.
And that's the opportunity, right? I know we talk about the hundreds of thousands of open jobs right now. They're I don't know, tens of thousands in manufacturing, tens of thousands in healthcare, tens of thousands in utilities, right? The opportunity here is, if you do those analysis of what you need for your sector, that's the competitive advantage right there, because then you can kind of put the mixture together, right? Perhaps you don't need the sort of super senior, pen tester that some sectors might need.
Yeah.
Depending on your sector. But there are some skills from pen testing that perhaps you need. And but then you're building up a profile of the people that you're looking for or a group of people that you're looking for that are not necessarily the same people that you're competing against. I think that's why, in our strategy, we sort of talk about 90% of the jobs will require some form of digital skills. And I think that you can take that analogy further by saying more and more jobs will require cyber skills. And even your job, let's just say you're like a water utility, you're like, on a water engineer or whatever. There might not be a cyber in your title or your job description, but we think that you will have to do some of those work, right? On the flip side, right? It's like software engineer. You're not a cyber engineer, a software engineer, but like what the National Cybersecurity Strategy was saying, like we need to build more resilient, secure stuff. So in this way, like software engineer is, while they're not cyber security focused people, they can start building things that are more resilient as well, right? Coding things that are more resilient. So you can see a lot of all this analogy everywhere. I think that's it, right? Like when you think about the key point of what we're trying to do here, and you see this in this report, is the administration is taking a coordinated approach, a whole of nation approach, because these jobs exist in all different sectors, not all technical or not technical in a way that you envision it. Their technical could be in a water utility technical, right, or energy pipeline technical work there, but they're not the guy in the hoodie anymore. So that's the headline. So if that is what's happening, what are we doing to help? Well, we're elevating skill-based approaches. We're leading by example in the federal government. So you should do it too. And we're cooperating and partnering with private sector, academia, state and local government, nonprofits, all these different organizations to all collectively get there, right? Skill-based approaches, hands-on learning. Think about, reading about your work roles, right? How are you creating a pipeline and on-ramp so that we can remove barriers and broaden pathways for folks to join in? Then we talk about individual or regional differences, right? Like a job in, Tampa, Florida is very different from San Antonio, Texas, very different from Washington, D.C., very different from like Boise, Idaho. So, when you take a locally driven approach, you think about collectively, what do we need? What kind of skill sets are necessary in your region, right? And then that permeates to, at the organization level, what are the skill sets that I need for my business objectives, for my mission? Then it permeates then to, what are some of the on-ramps that we can get? Oh, perhaps I need to partner with my local two-year college, or maybe even K-12 school districts, to kind of figure out how can we get some of these foundational and basic training so that you have a pipeline of entry-level employees. And then you think about, are we asking too much from our middle or senior level technical people? How do we readjust that? And how do I be a part of the training and education solution, right? Like as company or as employer, should I maybe partner with a 4-year for certification, or should I partner with my trade association so that collectively on a smaller side, you don't have resources, you're busy, right? So perhaps the trade association has a work stream that can kind of support all the smaller players in a way that is beneficial for everybody. So you can kind of see the through line of all the skill approaches, but they are emanating in different ways. And then, and all we do in the White House is we're convening, we're pushing the same vision. But really what we have found is that many of the better solutions, good solutions, come from businesses. They come from locally driven partnerships, right? Like, I didn't go tell, anybody to kind of merge water and cyber, because anyone on my team or the administration, but some universities saw the opportunity and they're kind of like forming it. But what we do is we are spreading the gospel. Now, more schools are seeing like, water and cyber, interesting. Every county has like a water treatment plant,
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that is, so that's like the exciting part of the work. And I hope that like, the the people who read our report will see the direction that we're taking and kind of join us on this in this work.
Since when this is published, the report should be available. Do you have a placeholder or a link where people can go access that report yet, or is it a TBD?
Go to whitehouse.gov/cyber workforce. That's where you should track all our work. That's where all the commitments live. That's where all the strategy lives. And the report will be on there as well. And then there's also a way for all of you to reach out to us. If you scroll down to the webpage, there is a form there. So if you have, any ideas that you would like to pursue or any on your project that you think is very aligned and you want to talk to us about it, we always look for projects to highlight and elevate. Just because other people might be thinking about the same thing, and if they see an example working in a different region or in a different sector, they might try to replicate it in their sector or in their region, and then collectively we're that much better when we do so.
Awesome. Well, Siyu, thank you so much for sharing updates on where things are with ONCD and the progress of the strategy. Exciting things to come.
Thank you so much. And for those who are talking to your friends, make sure that they consider a career in cyber. It's a good thing, it's meaningful, and then you will be helping defend the nation. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
That's Siyu Mo, Assistant National Cyber Director in the Office of the National Cyber Director at the White House, speaking with our N2K President, Simone Petrella. Attention all security professionals. Want real-time IP intelligence at your fingertips? Sign up for Scout Insight's free trial today. Get immediate insights into threats, search any IP with no training required, and enjoy intuitive graphical results. Whether you need to identify compromised hosts or enrich Splunk queries, Scout Insight has you covered. Don't wait. Accelerate your threat response now. Visit teamcumry.com/cyberwire to start your free trial.